Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Bill, there are reports that Kristi Noem says that she visited the DMZ. I haven't seen her here. Have you?
Was that in the book? She was a full-fledged DMZ. Was she Northern or Southern DMZ?
Well, that's it. That's the point. She claims that she was in North Korea visiting Kim Jong-un, but that is now in dispute. She refuses, though, to back down from it. I don't know if you've seen this. She has gone on, she's been on Newsmax, Fox Business, and they are not letting her off the hook. They're asking her, just help explain this to us. Did you or did you not meet the North Korean dictator? And she refuses to actually give them a straight answer. So this is, as a former PR guy, Bill, I feel like she might be violating some of the best practices here.
Well, you can probably speak to this better than I can as, a member of the conservative movement in good standing. But I feel like this sort of never apologize, never explain approach is very deliberate when any kind of, conservative gets into a jam. And I was struck by, there was a political reporting that she had a book out, I think a couple years ago, where this came up and her team was like, why would you ever put this in a book? Never speak of this again. And this was with a conservative imprint. This new book was in it for a conservative imprint, and they were like, let it fly.
It was my imprint, by the way, Bill. It's Center Street, who did my book, Filthy Rich Politicians, is the same folks. I would not blame them at all. I think this is on her. And the ghostwriter that she presumably, retained. But I think this is really on her.
It was a choice to do this. It's a choice to do this, having been told before this would be an incredibly damaging thing to say, and so to lean into it strikes me as being done with eyes wide open, knowing that the audience she's playing to likes it when the media blows their stack.
Well, there's the killing the dog thing, which initially I thought, hey, who knows? Maybe this helps her with the Veep stakes. Maybe Donald Trump likes this, or certainly it was a mistake made. The same reason that Katie Britt, made her disastrous State of the Union response is they're trying to do they're trying to be who they think Trump wants them to be, but they don't have the immunity that Trump has. Trump probably could shoot a dog and be fine. Noem doesn't have it. But you're right, Bill. I think this refusal to back down, to apologize, to even frankly answer a direct question, I think that it's based on the premise that you can't do that, because being a Republican today, being a MAGA supporter, means never having to say you're sorry. It means never apologizing. It means never backing down. But those rules don't always apply for people whose last name doesn't end in Trump.
Not always, but let's remember the Montana governor, Gianforte. Remember, he body slammed a reporter when he was running for Senate. Like it was Senate first, then governor, right?
You got me on that one. I can't remember what, but I can tell you it was Ben Jacobs.
But he's in office today. That's all I know.
Yeah, he's now the governor of Montana, right?
He was waiting for the House when that happened.
Yeah, I think he was.
But I believe he won the race.
He's one of our filthy rich politicians, by the way. You should know he's a very rich guy. And he did body slam. I think he had to pay like $100 or something, like a fine. Right. If I knew that I could beat up journalists for $100, it's a good trade-off, I think.
So, I think you're right. Like, not everybody can get away with what Trump gets away with, but it's not just Trump either. There's an appetite for jousting with the media, sometimes more than jousting, that wins you applause with large segments of the Republican Party.
It's not working here. And in fact, even friendly outlets are pushing her, and maybe I don't know why. Is it because she's a woman? Is it I don't know why it is.
People like dogs. Lots of people like dogs. Dogs transcend ideology.
But the story now, Bill, I mean, maybe that opened the door to it, but the story now is about Kim Jong-un, that meeting that probably didn't happen.
Right,
And she would,
which is just idiotic, and
yeah,
she is, and she won't. I mean, basic PR is, when there's a discrepancy, you got to clear it up to put an end to the story. Don't feed the cycle, end the cycle. She's not ending the cycle.
yeah. And it's so unsatisfying and transparent, the BS spin that she's trying to say. I've had many meetings with foreign leaders for the last 30 years. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Not what I asked you.
Right. It's a very simple question to ask. She's refusing to answer it. So it's going to obviously lead to more and more questions and more head scratching.
All right. Well, another big story this week, Bill, of course, has been Stormy Daniels' testimony in the New York trial of Donald Trump. There's obviously, you and I are not lawyers. There's a lot of legal analysis, but there were a couple things that popped up that I want to talk about. But first, I know you previously, I think you read Stormy Daniels' autobiography or memoir and wrote about it. Did you see anything in recent days that that reminded you maybe of what you'd read in the past?
And just so folks know, so I wrote this for Politico in 2018. I not only read Stormy Daniels' book, but every book written by a presidential mistress, and I own them all, with the exception of the LBJ one, because that one was written by someone who basically pushed the conspiracy theory that LBJ killed JFK, and so it's not exactly a credible book, but it goes for like $300 on used book sites, because all the JFK conspiracy nuts want their hands on it, so I can't get my hands on it myself. And I do think the Stormy Daniels book holds up very well as far as like a good read to most of those books, although I do like the Mimi Alford Once Upon a Secret book the best, if you're into the genre, into the canon. But the Daniels book does suffer from digressions and trivial observations unrelated to Trump. And hearing that she was getting admonished by the judge for digressions and not answering questions directly. I said in the review, this had the hallmarks of a rush job because she was padding it with trivial information, and maybe it's just a certain personality type that just sort of I might do this on this show where I go off on tangent after tangent after tangent and can't shut myself up. So I'm not trying to be critical about it, but it sort of struck me that she was testifying in a way that was reminiscent of the book.
Well, and yeah, I mean, there is talk that that there could be now a mistrial based on things that she said.
Well, the judge seemed to shut that down, and I'm just regurgitating what I heard, from legal analyst talking heads, that defense attorneys ask for mistrials all the time, like that's sort of the thing.
Yeah.
This is the mistrial. This was it. Stop this whole thing, and you constantly push and badger to see if you can get that.
But I do think that is it Judge Merchan has really gone out of his way to kind of give Trump a lot of leeway in terms of the gag order, because he's afraid, I think, of casting Trump as a victim and possibly opening the door to a mistrial. So anything that, I mean, the judge in Florida, the Trump-appointed judge in Florida, has just postponed the Mar-a-Lago documents trial indefinitely. So it may be that the only thing we have is this New York trial. So anything that calls that into question or further delays justice has major implications.
Sure, but I think this judge seems much more inclined to get this done. Is not inclined. I don't think he wants to start all over and delay things. So I would imagine that something would have to happen that was so egregious that the judge would be like, "Oh, this is going to get appealed. There's no point going forward here." But the defense team has incentive to ask for it and lay down their markers, so they have a record of what has happened that they can use when they go for an appeal if there's a conviction.
Well, I wanted to bring up something I read in Politico, Bill, that I found a little troubling. Basically, they interviewed this guy, Samuel L. Perry, a sociologist of religion, who has written several books on conservative Christianity, including Addicted to Lust, which is about pornography. And so this Politico piece is titled, Evangelicals Hate Stormy Daniels, but Love Trump. Here's why. And I think it's obviously clear that evangelicals love Trump, despite the fact that Stormy Daniels, in her the first days of testimony, talked about how Donald Trump sort of said that Stormy reminded him of his daughter Ivanka, which is creepy, of course. We all know that this alleged affair between, or incident, I don't know what we're calling it, between Stormy and Trump happened while Melania had a newborn. And according to the testimony, Trump basically said, like, hey, look, Melania won't care. We don't even share the same bedroom. We've got separate rooms, which I feel like if you've got the square footage, go for that. That's not necessarily telling of a marriage, but whatever the case may be, he was sort of, it does not make Trump look good. And it's weird. I've always thought, and this is not an original idea, that it's weird that evangelicals love Trump so much. This piece, though, Bill, that I was just referencing in Politico, seeks to explain why that is the case. And basically, the argument that they're making, if I can sum it up, is that when you look to the Old Testament and you see people like King David or even Samson, these were like warriors, strong men. And strong men, strong godly men, but according to this theory, strong men also have strong urges and strong drives. And there's a sense at which, and there's even a line in there where it says something to the effect of, Trump isn't like he's not some Ned Flanders Christian. By the way, Ned Flanders was ripped, if you've ever seen him topless, I'm just saying. But be that as it may, he's not some Ned Flanders Christian. He's more like a Samson. So the idea is that I think this worldview that they're kind of pushing now says, like, if you are really a manly, masculine, godly man, you're gonna do what Trump did. You're like an Ubermensch. So you deserve to conquer and to reap the rewards of being a conqueror. And yes, these things are sins, but let's be honest, the kind of manly men that are needed, that God uses, are inherently the kind of men who do the things that Trump does.
Now, Matt,
interesting theory.
I'm not a religious person. You know that.
I know. Although you do live a more Christian life than pretty much anybody I know. But okay.
I've not read the Bible. I'm not a Bible scholar of any sort. So you correct me. You correct me if I'm wrong, Matt.
I am also not a Bible scholar, but but I have sat through many a church services.
So my understanding is there's this part called there's 10 of them commandments, and I think just one of them, it is just one, has something to do with adultery. Am I getting this right, Matt?
I think that's in there. I think that's one of the top 10.
Did this Samson guy violate that commandment at any point in the Bible?
He did, and here's the thing. It didn't work out well for him.
He did commit adultery? I didn't know that. That's true.
Yeah. I think it was with a prostitute. Again, not an expert. Possibly just a hot chick. Is it Delilah, right? Hey there, Delilah. I'm pretty sure she was smoking, getting it done, but it didn't work out for him. I think he is a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, you would think that evangelical Christians, as much as they look to the Old Testament for guidance, that it would actually be the New Testament that would guide them in their daily lives more than that. And I think the New Testament, Jesus and what Jesus had to say be even harder to make those rationalizations and to square that.
Well, it just seems like, and I didn't read the article. I didn't read the article because I was like, I already know the answer to this question. What am I possibly going to learn from this? I don't already know.
It's worth reading because it's not just another, hey, isn't it crazy that evangelicals support Trump? It's weird, right? It goes like this postulates a theory which I think is incredibly dangerous. If people buy into this world, if Christian men buy into this worldview, it creates a license. I mean, I'm about to tell my wife, like, hey, look, technically, I know we're married, but I found this loophole because as a godly man, as a strong masculine leader of this family, I'm not going to be able to help it. I'm just not going to be able to help myself. And we can look at dear President Trump as an example. And I may have to go talk to some pastors and just explain to them, hey, you guys like Trump, right? Well, this is the new vibe. What do you think?
But it was already pretty clear to me that a lot of people who are self-described evangelicals have become untethered to traditional, church-following practices, and they've shifted their allegiance to Trump, and they've revised all of these other moral guidelines that they profess that they should be under, and that political leaders should be under. I mean, you and I were alive during the Clinton presidency when that was all the rage. That how could we ever have a president, someone this degenerate, being an example for our kids? And that was coming from the Ralph Reeds, the Jerry Falwells of the discourse. And that's all just completely down the memory hole now. And I'm just not at all, like, I'm not shocked by it at this point. Like that's just where we are.
Yeah, I do think this argument is the next logical conclusion that we're this is progressing. And look, I mean, okay, here's where they're right. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We are all sinners. This is Christian theology. We are all sinners. We all commit sins. And God does use people. God has and does use people who have committed egregious errors. And he can take a bad situation and make it good. Like, all these things are true, but you have to sincerely repent. And as a culture, as a society, to set up a premise that not only can God make lemonade out of lemons, but that actually, if you're a strong man who is really going to be used, you have to have done these things at the age of like 60 too. We're not talking about youthful indiscretions either. I mean, this, and also Trump says he doesn't ask God for forgiveness. So again, this part is not original, but I found this Politico piece to be more troubling than others I've read.
But to apply that logic politically, obviously, can and is done extremely selectively and self-servingly. Like, this sinner, I'm going to say, is God's instrument to do what I want, and this sinner is obviously, a Marxist fascist who wants to destroy America. You're inserting yourself into being the decision maker of what God's plan is.
Totally. I remember back in 2016 having a meal with my extended family and them telling me they're for Trump, and me telling them all the bad stuff Trump did, and them telling me that God can use flawed people, and me saying, do you think God could use Hillary? So I'm with you. The other thing that this article points out is the double standard with women. Why evangelicals will accept Trump but not Stormy, that there is a double standard, that with men, this is a sign of virility and strength, but for women, no, it's not good. So there is a double standard, of course, and it's a political double standard, and it's probably also relates to gender as well.
Now, the other Trump thing that is happening that is sort of on the maybe opposite end of the spectrum here in a certain respect, is that he was invited to the Libertarian Party convention, and he's going. Um, and as is RFK, and RFK wants to have a debate with him, which I don't think is going to happen at the convention. I'm just trying to get the date of the convention. I believe it's this month. I just don't have the top of my
Well,
top
I
of
saw
my
that
head.
RFK yesterday on Twitter did challenge Trump to a debate.
Right. So
at
they're
this
both
meeting.
invited. They're both going to speak. I don't think that Trump is going to accept this invitation to debate, but what do I know? Trump makes weird decisions. He may want to take him up on that to say, hey, people, don't vote for, if you like me, don't vote for this guy. He's a raging liberal. So maybe he actually does have incentive to do it. So Kennedy is set to speak on May 24th and Trump on May 25th. I don't believe it's ever happened. I know John F. Kennedy spoke to the Liberal Party of New York in 1960, but he actually got their ballot line. He was actually getting it. He was accepting a nomination, and I don't believe. At least the New York Times reported that neither was expected to get the nomination. I am going to talk to a Libertarian Party official after this call, see if I can get any more intel on that.
Yeah. Well, let me make a quick point here. So here's my understanding. When you hear the word libertarian or think of the Libertarian Party, you might be thinking of like Reason Magazine or Cato, right? And these are people who believe that they believe in liberty and freedom, and that they're pro marijuana, but they're also, they're against big government, all that stuff. That is not what the Libertarian Party today is. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Libertarian Party has been taken over by what could more correctly be described as anarcho-capitalists. These are followers of von Mises, the economist, and people like Lew Rockwell. So these are not libertarians like Reason Magazine or Cato. These are kind of right-wingers. In some cases, they may be like Southern agrarian lost causers. They tend to be like, maybe Ron Paul would be the best way. I think I should have started there. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Ron Paul is the frame to think of this through.
My understanding is this Mises crowd is MAGA-like, Trump-like. It's not just that they're not strictly that they're Ron Paul acolytes. I saw a report in Reason that there's legitimate accusations of racism among them. And it feels to me, and again, I'm not having the deepest dive yet, like how many parties can Donald Trump destroy? How many parties can Donald Trump corrupt intellectually? The Libertarian Party has always been kind of has zigzagged a lot over the years, so it's not quite. And the Republican Party has evolutions too. All parties evolve in some way, but there is literally nothing about Donald Trump that is remotely libertarian. This is a man who wants to use government as a weapon. He wants to literally pick and choose industries using government largesse. He wants to use prosecutors to wage a political warfare. There's certain nods towards lower taxes and deregulation, but that's like the best you do. Even a lot of libertarians are very pro-immigration. That labor should flow like capital. Donald Trump is 100% not that. So to have any kind of limited embrace of this is an injection of an ideological toxin into what this party is supposed to be about, just as much as it has been for the Republican Party, and that has mutated the Republican DNA at this point. So if I'm a libertarian, I'm losing my mind. If I'm a true libertarian, I'm losing my mind. And I think as for the rest of us, it just shows how Trump is trying to gain office by appealing to every fringe constituency possible, instead of appealing to the broad middle, to be trying to appeal to this Mises caucus at the same time where Joe Biden is literally giving speeches about the rise in anti-Semitism and the use of anti-Zionism to be anti-Semitic. There's a certain political risk for Biden to do that. This is people on the far left who are pushing these things, and Biden is saying, this is too much for me, and I got to draw a line here. So it really just, I think, crystallizes how the two candidates see how one should win election and hold the country together.
I think that's a very good observation, Bill. There's nothing conservative about Trump, and there's nothing libertarian about Trump, and yet the conservatives love him. The Republicans love him, and now the Libertarian Party. Can he destroy multiple parties? Can he make more words meaningless? Film at 11.
But I know you're still struck by, the Nikki Haley numbers.
Yes.
That keep coming in. I think up 23% at Indiana last night. Is that right?
Something like that. I mean, she's now been out of the race for months. And so the fact that this suggests to me that there is, a fifth of Republican voters, and not all of these states are open either, right? I don't know about Indiana, but she has put up some pretty good numbers in states that have closed Republican primaries. So there is clearly some percentage of the party, some non-irrelevant, non-zero percentage of the party that is not satisfied with Trump. The question is, does this mean that they won't vote for Trump or that they'll vote for Biden? I don't think we know the answer to that, but it's not like a red siren Drudge story, but it's something to keep an eye on, remains to be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, we can never know how many of these people are people who voted for Trump before and will now no longer vote for Trump. Is there actually vote loss here that we are picking up on? We just can't know for a fact. I wrote recently last week at the Washington Monthly Newsletter, looking at the swing state poll averages and the national averages. You do see slight uptick towards Biden nationally. You see that tracking Rust Belt swing states, and even though the Sun Belt swing states are a tougher road for Biden, you actually saw a narrowing of the gap in the past 2 months. So it's really not out of the question that there's enough of a bleed on the center right for Biden to pull this off. Now, something else that I noticed that I wrote about yesterday for the Washington Monthly Newsletter that I'm not aware of being covered anywhere else. I mean, it's very possible that I missed it, so I don't want to prematurely pat myself on the back. In the Real Clear Politics average of the generic congressional ballot, this is when pollsters ask, in your congressional district, which party's candidate do you plan to vote for? So there's no name attached to it, just Democrat or Republican. The Republicans had that lead for like a 5-month stretch, and Democrats took the lead in late April, and now it's at 1.4. You look at the 538 average, it's not. The Democrats tied it up in like at the end of February, and very slightly widened that lead recently to 0.6. And that was as of May 1. I didn't check it this morning, though, if it's moved at all. But it's another metric showing that there's been a bit of a leftward tick in the past couple months in a race that both at the presidential and the congressional level is still very close. And I think there's been some misunderstanding over the years that Democrats have to do much better than a bare lead because the Electoral College is so skewed to the Republicans and the House gerrymandering is so skewed to Republicans that they got to be winning these things like by 5, 6, 7 to feel good about it. And the last 3 House election cycles, the national popular vote has tracked the seat share. It has not been the case. I mean, there's an example. You go back, 10 years where like Republicans didn't win the popular vote for the House and still won the majority, but that was an anomaly, not the trend. And there's also a question: are the polls accurate? And you never can know for sure. And you look back at the last 10 or so elections, like more often than not, Republicans outperform the polls, but not always. There are, I counted 4 times in the last 11 House elections where Democrats outperformed the final poll average. And these divergences are not that big. It's usually like 1 to 2 points. You can find a 3 or close to 4, but it hasn't been that far off. So, Democrats up by 1 point. I'm not spiking a football and saying they're going to win, but they don't have to do that much more than that close to election day to say, you know what, they're probably going to win the House here. And of course, when it is close, it comes down to obviously specific seats and specific districts. I'm not saying that the national number is like the be-all end-all, but it has been a pretty good indicator where this goes.
Well, I think the fact that the House is so tight, that Republicans have such a slim majority, Bill, is also impacting the governing or the kind of internal machinations of the right flank of the Republican Party, the Freedom Caucus, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie. There was an attempt that Greene was going to try to go after Johnson, and I think she filed this motion to vacate, but didn't privilege the amendment or whatever the verbiage is or the terms of art for that. But it appears to me, Bill, that Donald Trump has now talked to Greene, said, hey, we don't need this drama. When Donald Trump is talking you down, that's a problem. We don't need this drama. There aren't enough seats to spare. And it seems like Greene, she has this list of demands, but it seems like she's looking now for a way to save face and back down from this. But what's your read on that?
Yeah, I mean, I assume that Taylor Greene, never thought she had the votes here to actually oust Johnson, but want to put people on record, expose the divisions in the party, put herself up as the great hero fighting the uniparty. And we talked about this before. For whatever reason, Donald Trump seems to have gotten the message that he doesn't need that kind of intra-party squabbling between now and election day. Now, I mean, he's usually the king of intra-party squabbling. He has very gleefully attacked other rhinos. He still criticizes Mitch McConnell, and that's a way that he shows his bona fides to hardcore base folks, and is also his alpha male bona fides by forcing these other people to fall in line with him. So it's slightly out of character for him to give Mike Johnson a pass for doing things that are conciliatory with Democrats. But Donald Trump does have these sporadic, pragmatic streaks, and he seems to have accepted the memo from somebody. Someone on his team must have told him, look, you just don't need this right now. You don't need to go 10 rounds with Mike Johnson between now and election day. You don't need to really elevate the Ukraine argument. You can blur that line right now and worry about the policy later. I'm obviously doing a lot of inferring and speculating, but that's what I'm guessing is happening here.
Well, you and I have talked about this before, and I think we disagree, but I actually think there's a real affinity that Donald Trump has for Mike Johnson. I think that for some reason, Donald Trump likes Mike Johnson, and so he gets away with more than other people might. That's just my reading of it, for what it's worth. So, but it could change.
All right, I do have to jump at 10, so I don't know if there's anything else you want to hit before we have to call it.
I think that was a short but sweet Very solid episode of the DMZ. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Bill, anything you want to plug?
Well, just check out the Washington Monthly newsletter that I referenced earlier. And I should have my upcoming column about Trump and the Libertarians up tomorrow morning.
Read my stuff at the Daily Beast, of course. And I just did an interview with Nancy French, who is wife of New York Times columnist David French. She's out with a new memoir called Ghosted. She's actually a former ghostwriter. She wrote books for Ann Romney, Ben Sass, Sarah Palin, Bristol Palin. So I got to pick her brain on what it's like to be a ghostwriter and get her thoughts on the Kristi Noem thing. But her story is really interesting. So I recommend the book Ghosted, and check out that podcast at my other feed, Matt Lewis Can't Lose, Bill.
Very exciting. Always good to talk to you, Matt.
Good talking to you. We'll see you back here in the DMZ next week.
Take care.